And that is that. Yeah, that's our story so far. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is building internal capacity or internal capability. So capacity, capability, we would really view the two terms as being interchangeable. So certainly Aurion is on hand to support organisations and to develop e-learning programmes. You know, there are many of our client partners where we would develop all their e-learning programmes. But increasingly we're seeing that there is a desire to build skills and capacity, and we're responding to that with our services so that you can actually build e-learning yourself. So even if you think, you know, I'm not technical, I'm not an IT wizard, there are tools available. You don't have to be. You can create engaging e-learning yourself. Obviously, there are some pointers you should follow, so we're not, you know, just producing slide, but it is possible. I think Sharon would be testament to that certainly the team could take care of a lot of their own e-learning build needs with Joanna as well within Storyline. So what do we mean by internal capability? That's what we're going to cover. What skills will you need? Give you an idea of a development roadmap of how e-learning courses get made, and that can help you to see what points of the process might we want to handle in-house, what points might we want to work with a partner. We'll do a whistle-stop tour. You could talk all day about authoring tools, but we'll do a whistle-stop tour of some common, well-known e-learning authoring tools. If you're at that point and you're thinking of creating e-learning content, what tools might you want to look further into? We'll talk about some of the challenges with capability building and how to overcome them, and then obviously any questions that you have. So, you know, we'll touch on a little bit. What do we mean by capability or capacity building? So, within Aurion, we would work with a range of organisations, and again, there's lots of different paths, lots of different versions of capacity building. Basically, it means handling some or all of the e-learning development process in-house. That might be with support from a partner like Aurion, or it might be doing the whole thing in the house. So we do provide a range of services and training related to that, which we'll come on to. But what are the benefits to that? Well, probably be upfront. It's potentially a lower cost option, particularly if you've got a lot of content. Obviously, we do develop quite engaging e-learning content. We don't necessarily do it for free. Not that it's overly expensive. It is good value for money. But particularly if you have a lot of topics, a lot of content, it can be useful to build that internal capacity. So even at a low level, so that if you have a program that you want to just tweak or change, you've got that capability to do that in-house. So certainly even some of our recent customers in Scotland have moved to Aurion because of our capacity building aspect, rather than have to go to a supplier and pay X or 1,000X to get a small change made to a course because of a change in legislation. If you can have the skills and the capacity to do that in-house, you can respond to immediate training needs. So what skills do I need if we're going to start a bit of an in-house e-learning team? To talk about professional e-learning teams, so the kind of team you would see at Aurion, regardless of the team format, we have our subject matter experts, and we've talked about that already. So you might have to go somewhere to get that source content that you need. So that might be your flavourings expert, that might be your master baker. So we're going to have to work with people in-house. We're going to have to get their buy-in, and we're going to have to be able to extract the knowledge that they have. And more importantly, as we focus on those practical tips that they have from the year's experience, not maybe just what's on the bullet points of their PowerPoint slide. So that might be stories from their experience, etc. Typically, we would have a project manager. Their role and responsibility would be budget and timelines and planning. And then we would have a team that made up of graphic designers, which would be our visual look and feel of courses, so making them look nice, making them look on brand with what our marketing colleagues might have in their brand guidelines document. Then we would have our instructional design team. So instructional design is really the treatment of your content. How do we take that folder or file that we have, or that policy, and how do we treat it so that it can be understood and can have actually real impact with our learners? And then we would have our interactive developers. So not to scare you here in terms of recruitment, but we would also have our AV team, so any audio-visual materials. We have Richard here today, and Richard would maybe go out and shoot maybe scenarios or head-to-camera pieces that our instructional design team had scripted and prepared. Then we would have our QA team, so in terms of testing, making sure that there's no typos, making sure that the course works well on the network, that it works on different browsers. So it can be very different in the DIY e-learning department, and I'm sure Sharon would love to have 8-10 people all working towards the courses. But again, we're going to have our subject matter experts, and then we're going to have our DIY developer who has to fulfill some or all of those roles. So it's really about looking what skills do you have, a little bit of a competency or self-assessment. What skills do we have in-house? Do we love graphic design? Do we love working with computers, or are we better maybe at storyboarding content? And then ultimately we have our client. But again, a scale down from that might be it's just me. That's not uncommon as well. So might be a senior management directive, might be an obvious training need, but somebody somewhere has said, can we not do this online? And next thing you find yourself with 30 topics that you need to train because the travel budget's being cut by 40%. And how are we going to do that online? Where do we even start with that? So in terms of how e-learning gets developed, so this is a development roadmap. So sort of give you some of the stages. Typically, you'll start with a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, a lot of asking easy questions, a lot of asking difficult questions at the start as well. So a bit of research into the content itself that you're looking to deal with, and an analysis of your target audience. So if we're developing something for the public, we need to think about what their needs are. If we're developing something for internal staff, well, they're going to have different needs. And it's not uncommon, even within the same organisation, you might actually have 5 or 6 different target audiences. You might have an induction program that all staff complete, but you might then have specialist programs that are for particular groups. So trying to make the content match to their requirements. And we would then enter a content outline, or as we call it, a curriculum plan. So it would list out what are our learning objectives for the course, the needs of our target audience, any technical spec that we need to take care of. And then the instructional design team would get to work with the content treatment. So typically there would be some form of storyboard. So that can be text-based, it can be image-based, but typically a point-by-point or slide-by-slide walkthrough of what the course is going to look like. So when we go to build, we know exactly what we're building. So you might decide to build a prototype. But say, am I going down the right path? And you might put that out for some users to test. Then, when you incorporate that feedback, you would have your main build and then your acceptance testing. So again, when it comes to capacity building, and I think I had this slide about biting off more than you can chew, but it's what can you chew? What is your area of expertise? What are you comfortable doing? What do you maybe need training or support in? What do you need a bit of guidance? What do you need resources in? So it might be, we would have clients where actually they take the program to storyboard, and because they don't have the time for the build, they'll hand that over to Aurion, and Aurion will build maybe a set of modules for them. It might be that Aurion will do the whole thing. It might be that our clients will do the whole thing, and then we'll QA it and refine it for them. Maybe add some special interactions or animations to sort of lift what they've developed. So lots of different paths. And again, it's picking out what might work for you. So there are lots of tools available to help for internal capacity, lots of tools that you can use to develop all sorts of different content. And it might not be a traditional e-learning program. It might be learning how to use a webinar tool. It might be learning how to do screen captures so that you can explain how a new IT system works. It might be learning how to do video conferencing or other online tools, blogs, discussion forums. So not everything has to be a traditional e-learning program. For the purpose of today, and probably the most common way to create content is with what's called an e-learning authoring tool. So some jargon, you might have heard of rapid e-learning, but typically we would tend to call them authoring tools. So there's a few that we'll touch on here today you might want to be aware of. Aurion, we use a range of tools, probably at least 8 to 10. Sometimes that depends on client requirements, maybe licenses that you have already in place. If we had to pick a favourite, I'll come to that in a second. So if you know PowerPoint, then Articulate Studio is a nice starter tool for beginners. It actually sits as a ribbon within PowerPoint. So it allows you to add that extra layer of tracking of interactivity to PowerPoint slides. So, the pluses are, with PowerPoint skills, you're a good bit of the way there. There's a bit extra to learn. Now, it does sit within PowerPoint. That does pose some technical issues just in terms of what it can do. So it's maybe not the most extensive in terms of its features. But, it is possible to create quality learning content. And a lot of that does come back to that storyboarding and instructional treatment. So it's a plug-in software. So it's installed in your local machine, plugs into PowerPoint. Potentially our favourite tool at the moment is Articulate Storyline. They have a nice little explainer on the Storyline website, which, again, we like as well. So it'll explain a little bit about what Storyline can do. Now, it is a slide-based tool. It's not in PowerPoint, but it's not dissimilar to PowerPoint. It's a standalone installed software product. We find that it handles audio and video pretty well. We find that also for simulations, which is your screen captures, it does now have a screen capture tool built into it as well. It can allow you to do simple things. It can allow you to do ready-made interactions, as we call them, which would be like your multiple choice questions. If you get more confident with it, you can go in and do things like branching scenarios. So as Sharon said, maybe a branching scenario where we ask you to make some decisions and you go off down a path. Maybe it's treating a patient or working with a customer, and you make a few mistakes in a safe environment. You get some feedback. You backtrack in the scenario and you go off somewhere else. So that's quite a sophisticated form of interaction. It does have a bit of a learning curve, not excessive, but just obviously depends on your familiarity with software. So typically, some training would be recommended. But as Sharon touched on, there is a good Articulate Storyline support forum as well. So it's definitely one to take a look at. I think even within our little booklet, we have the top 5 features as one of the articles within that. Another good tool is Adobe Captivate, and again, we would have developed programs, and lots of our clients would have been trained and developed programs with Adobe Captivate. Again, it's a standalone installed software product. Traditionally, it was very good on the simulation screen capture side, but it has added a whole range of features, and it's part of an Adobe E-Learning suite. So you may even go looking and find somewhere in the organization somebody has an Adobe license for your PDF reading, and it might, if you look close enough, extend to other areas of Adobe. That's not uncommon that we find that. Actually, we have licenses because we have a master agreement with Adobe, so it's worth looking at if you're in a corporate or public sector organization. Camtasia is another tool for screen captures. So where a screen capture might be good, for example, we're working with Scottish Prison Service and they're rolling out an e-procurement system. So they need to show people actually where do I click on this system to make it do what I want it to do. So again, screen captures, we're actually doing that within Storyline, but the same concept would apply to Camtasia. Screen captures, slides, simple slides, maybe with voiceover or some guidance on where to click. So with capacity building, what are some of the challenges? So try to think of the questions that we would hear, out and about, speaking to customers and prospective customers. So I know how to train, but not in an e-learning format. And our response to that would be, have you considered instructional design training? So I wouldn't say we have a response for everything, but we do hear some questions. So instructional design training would actually walk you through a bit of that theory of rewiring. I think that's a good term for delivery online. So what works well in the classroom, but what works well in online learning. And we'll walk you through a little bit of the process with e-learning. So I like to think of it as the education basis that you can actually use with your technical skills. So my team and I are trainers. We're not techies. IT teams you can either love them or loathe them. At some point, you probably need their involvement, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a technical task to develop e-learning content. I think Sharon and the team would be testament to that. So we would say, have you considered e-learning authoring tools or maybe other types of tools depending on the content that you're looking to produce? How do we ensure consistency when we have multiple content authors? And that's a big one. If you have maybe 3-4 content authors and you say, right, I'll develop an e-learning course on this topic, you do that topic, we all go off, come back a few weeks later, we'll probably come back with very different things. in terms of look and feel, in terms of structure. Well, I've got 3 learning outcomes and 5 questions in my assessment. Somebody else has got 10 learning outcomes and doesn't have an assessment. So part of where you can do that in terms of look and feel is a branded template. Another way to do that is what we call a content style guide, so laying out your in-house structure. We'll talk a bit more about that. So how can I roll out e-learning development internally? So how can I get somebody else to start developing courses in their department? And again, it can be documenting those in-house standards, so things like accessibility, things like how our assessments should be structured, how our courses should be structured, and the branding, etc., that they should follow. And taking that a step further, with lots of our long-term customers, we tend to have what we call framework customers, where we work with them on a long-term basis. What we do is take that a step further, that documenting of standards, and actually document things like how do we look after our pictures in-house, how do we structure our files, best practice tips to do that, and we make those available to our framework customers. So our approach to capacity building, we like to package things up. Now, you don't actually get it, there isn't actually a box, unfortunately, with capacity building, but it's a little bundle, because we were finding again and again the same issues come up. So there are, you can take from this as well, even if you don't avail of our services, that there are some things you might want to think about. So our approach to capacity building tends to involve some or all of the following. Instructional design training, so typically we do a 1-day course on site for people who are going to be working on e-learning. Again, designed not to patronise, but just to inform existing trainers and to educate them in rewiring that mindset for online delivery. Typically we'll do a 2-day authoring tool course, so explaining how a tool works, and maybe allow you to go away and play and create a bit of content and come back as a bit of a clinic to see how you got on with that. We develop authoring tool templates, and I'll show you, some examples of that, as well as that content style guide document. So if our expert goes on and moves elsewhere, do they take all our knowledge with us, or is there a tangible e-learning legacy that is there that somebody else can pick it up? They might need a bit of top-up training, but with a content style guide, they would know how to use the template, know how the course should be structured. So starting to create a bit of an e-learning brand, So an organisation X e-learning course, looks this way. It has this introduction. It has this type of assessment. So it takes a bit of that guesswork out and just ensures consistency. And typically we would follow that on then with a series of content support days. And that might be somebody at the end of the phone that you can pick up and ask one of our team a technical question or a question about the authoring tool. Or it might be coming out and actually doing a clinic with a team to monitor their progress, to give them advice if somebody has a question about treating content. So we do a range of different courses. Instructional design and authoring tool are just 2, so it really depends on the needs. It's very much tailored. So it might be delivering effective webinars, or it might even be, if you're very early stages, looking in depth at the authoring tools that are available, so we can help you make the right decision. So this is an example just of a template. It's developed in Article Storyline for the NHS in Scotland. Okay. So within this, we would have, typically within a template, 15 to 20 different slide types. And we would work with you to give advice on sourcing images as well. But there'd be different slide types. The idea being that you can drop your content in. So all the courses then that NES, this is for the dentistry team. For all the courses that the dentistry team do, they have different slide types that they can drop their content into. So you might have our multiple choice question, for example. So you can see how that, professionally, you maybe add an image, you'll type in your question, you'll type in your options, and so you're a good bit up and running. And the end result being that they have consistent courses. Okay. This example of a UCD template. So if you do a UCD online course, you probably come across this template. So what Aurion did there, we actually had a big team, 30 academics. We did the training on-house, and then we did a series of clinics with each team. So each team would book in for a 2-3 hour slot with an Aurion member of staff coming on site, and we would work through their progress, really to help them get online degree programs to the point that they actually be launched and that they would look the part, that international students would be willing to pay for them as well and be happy with the experience. We also shot video introductions with each of the lecturers talking about the course, They actually appear on screen, shot against a green screen, and they walk you through, actually, with their hands, the modules that we're going to cover and explain a bit about the course. This is taken again from Gleneagles. So Gleneagles is an interesting example where quite often we do what we call our Capacity Plus, where Aurion will actually build the first program for an organisation and then provide the template and training as a phase 2, so you can then run on additional programs. So what Gleneagles did there is actually they take their programs now to storyboard phase themselves, and we review the storyboard, they refine it, and then Aurion actually does the build. So it means that we can actually build 10 modules for them at once as one development project. And if you're from the HSE, there is a standard now HSE storyline template for HSE-wide courses. And again, this is an example of where Aurion has actually developed perhaps a more bespoke interaction, talking about the transfer of germs. So it's got audio and it walks you through images showing how, I don't want to put you off the hospital, but how germs can potentially, if we don't follow the steps, be transferred between patients. And again, it's the same slide that Maureen had. It's what's the right path for you, What is the remit or what is the task maybe that you have or you've been given, and what type of content, what type of approach, and what type of process is going to work for you in-house.